Okay, cool. Right. Welcome back to those that have been here before, and welcome for the first time for those that are starting or that are here for the first time. And our videos obviously are actually posted on YouTube as well. So thank you to the guys that are on the call now, and also to the people that are watching on our YouTube channel. Welcome. Okay, so for those that don't know, we're the Zim Property Investors. It's a family that we created a few months back. I think it's about April time. And all we do here is just share value on property. We're all on different parts of our journeys, and we've all got experience that we can share, and something that we share will help someone who's either starting out or the people that are already in the journey. And also we have people on the group that are looking for joint ventures, that are looking for funds, that are looking for people to work with. And we have all these opportunities coming left, right, and center. So if you want to be part of it, feel free to get in touch, and we will see how we can help. Okay, so I still got quite a few people that are joining. Welcome. So today, I had sent out a message in our WhatsApp group just to mention what it is that we're going to be speaking about. I'm just going to change it now to speaker view. Yeah, I mentioned that we're going to be talking about the presentation that was done yesterday, which is regarding rent to rent, and also a bit about mindset. So I'm going to share that presentation today. I will go through it, and at the end, the guys that are on the call, obviously you have the chance to be able to ask the questions straight away. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, feel free to drop the questions on the comments box, or just join us on the ZPI group on Facebook and get in touch with us and ask the questions that you may have with you. Okay. So for the guys that are on the call now, has anyone got any questions so far? Because in a minute, I'm going to be muting everyone and then starting the presentation. If you've got anything that you want to ask before we get started, feel free to ask now. Okay, I haven't had any questions. If you're currently speaking, you're on mute. Otherwise, I'm assuming there are no questions. We're good to go. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through this presentation. And hopefully it will be helpful. Okay, I just need someone to confirm that they can see what I'm sharing.
Yeah, we can see it.
Brilliant. That sounded like Brian.
It is, bro. Good evening, everybody.
Gosh. How you doing, bro? Thanks for joining us. Nice to have you here.
Anytime.
Okay, so now I know a few of you guys on the call now are aware of what the rent-to-rent strategy is, and I'm just gonna go through it anyway as if you've never heard of it. So I'm gonna get started now. So I want to talk about the rent-to-rent strategy, and I throw in the word strategy very loosely because we don't believe that rent-to-rent is a strategy, but I'll go through that. Okay, so let's start with who I am. Okay, so who is this Muzzie guy that you guys are listening to? And I've got a picture here of my two girls, in Imani and Inara. Imani is 3 and Inara is 5 weeks. And on the right-hand side is the wife. I refer to her as the boss. I'm just trying to look to see if she's watching. She's not watching at the minute, so I can say what I want. Okay, so this is Charlene on the right, and whenever we talk about the property side, now there's a lot of challenges that come in property, or anything that you do actually, in fact, if that you're passionate about. There's a lot of challenges that will come your way, and you will find things difficult. You'll feel a bit lonely, and you feel like, why am I going through all this pain? I always say, remember why you're doing it. Start with why. And there's a very good book by a guy called Simon Sinek that's called Start with Why, and it talks about that concept of always remembering why you are doing what you're doing. And if things are going well, it doesn't matter why. But it's when things don't go very well, you have to sort of come back to starting to thinking about why you're doing it, and it starts pushing you forward. So this slide here is my why, and all the difficulties that we go through, or that I go through in particular in business, I always remind myself that these are the people that I do it for. Okay, so what is this rent to rent thing that people keep talking about? Now, in many cases, there's 4 categories of people that that I speak to, and when I ask this question, you'll probably find that you'll fit in one of these 4. So the first one will be, I have no idea what you're talking about. Literally have never heard of this rent to rent thing. And if that's you, this presentation is going to be very helpful to you. The second category is, I've heard a little bit about it. I don't know enough. I don't get it. So again, this presentation is going to help. So if you're one of the people that have heard of rent to rent, but you just don't actually understand it, listen in. The next category will be a person who will be thinking, I know about it and I'm not actually interested. Now, you may not be interested because you've either heard something bad about it, or maybe you are focusing on a completely different strategy and you're thinking, nah, rent to rent is not really my thing. I don't really want to be getting involved in that. You still want to listen to this because it's actually going to be helpful to you. There's certain skill sets about rent to rent that you can actually transfer into different strategies. And then the last one, last category, which is my favorite, is the one who's thinking, I know about rent to rent and I'm actually doing it right now and I absolutely love it. So you also want to be listening to this because there's some gems in this presentation that you might want to actually start utilizing. Okay. Right. So then, let's actually go through this statement. Now, some of you guys may know the Rockefeller family. This is a famous quote by Nelson Rockefeller that says, the secret to success is to own nothing and control everything. The concept of rent to rent lies around this statement, where you are controlling assets that don't belong to you and you're generating cash flow from them, but you don't actually own them. A good example is Uber or Airbnb. So Uber being one of the strongest and greatest platforms for transportation, but they don't own one vehicle. Airbnb being one of the strongest and greatest platforms for accommodation, but they don't own one property. And this is the same concept, which is what rent to rent is about. So I'm just going to go through an illustration. Now, a lot of people understand the concept of buying a property, whether you're buying it cash or you're actually buying it using a mortgage. So I'll go through an illustration of either purchasing or doing a rent to rent using the same numbers. Now, these numbers, I'm just trying to simplify them. They're not necessarily realistic for a certain area. I'm just making things a bit simple. So if we imagine in a certain area, call it Coventry. I say Coventry because that's the area that I'm in. Call it Coventry. Renting an area for this particular property is £1,000. And for serviced accommodation income, serviced accommodation being one of the strategies, let's say the income will be 2,500, and then the bills for that property are £500. If you were to purchase that property, this is a lovely property that you'll find in Coventry. So if you were to purchase this property, the purchase price being 100,000, 100K, the deposit that you're going to need is 25,000, because in many cases for a buy to let, you're going to get 75% loan to value. That means the lender or the bank or whoever it is that you're getting the funds from is most likely going to give you 75% off the purchase price. So 75% of the 100K will be 75,000, which means you have to raise a deposit of 25. The stamp duty, which is SDLT, stamp duty is about £3,000. I know at the minute for first-time buyers, there's no stamp duty in here. Let's calculate it based on that being there. Stamp duty is £3,000. Legals, that's the solicitors and some of the funds that you're going to pay the mortgage broker, £1,000, which means the total outlay i.e. the total amount of cash that you're going to get out of your pocket to purchase a property that is worth 100,000 is 29,000. So if we say the mortgage is about £500, based on the numbers that I've put at the top here, if the mortgage is £500 and the bills are £500 and you're running this property as a serviced accommodation on your own, not actually using an agent, you're going to be making £1,500. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, if we look at a different scenario, i.e. if you're going to be renting it, doing the rent-to-rent strategy, you're not buying this property anymore. You're just renting it. So someone has already bought it and you're renting it off them. So the cost of actually doing the setup and acquiring, so setup, i.e. buying the furniture, making it look really nice, acquiring probably the first month's rent, the deposit, you're looking at about £4,000 setting it up. Okay. Now in the area, you have to pay £1,000 and you have to pay the bills of £500, which means if you're going to be running this property on a rent to rent, you're going to be making £1,000 because you have to pay 1.5 to be able to run it, and you're making 2.5. Okay. Now, if you're looking at this picture here, you're probably thinking, well, the cash flow on the left is 1,500, the cash flow on the right is 1,000, so the one on the left is better. But you want to be thinking about how much money you've spent to be able to set this up. So to summarize this illustration, if you had £29,000, you can purchase that one property and make 1,500 a month. However, with that same 29,000, based on the illustration I've used for rent to rent, you could have about 7 of these rent to rents for the same amount of money. Therefore, you'll be making £7,000 a month, all being the same, everything being similar. So this is the concept of how you actually control things and don't own them and still generate cash flow from someone else's property. And this is the sort of like the advantages of rent to rent. Okay, so what can you do with the rent to rent deal? And this is where it comes to the fact where I was saying rent to rent itself is not a strategy. It's an acquisition tool. It's just like purchasing. So if you say you're purchasing is not the strategy. What you then do with the property after that is the strategy. So what you can do with a rent to rent deal, one is an HMO. HMO being houses in multiple occupancy. So this means you're renting each of the rooms out separately rather than giving the property out as a whole. So you've got a 5-bedroom house. You don't give it to one family to take on the whole 5-bed. You give each of the rooms their own tenant and actually rent it out that way. In many cases, you actually make a lot of money out of it. So you take on a 5-bedroom that someone has already bought, you rent it out as a 5-bed, and then you rent out each room to make a markup and you make a profit out of it. The other way is serviced accommodation, which we usually call SA. So you'll hear people say R2SA or R2HMO. This is what this means. Now, an SA, serviced accommodation, is essentially a hotel. You set up a whole property to run as a hotel. You set it up and make it look really nice. You give the property out and rent it out on a nightly rate. So on a nightly basis, just like you would a hotel. The picture that you're looking at here is actually one of our SA units that are in Coventry. This is a 1-bed. However, because it's a 1-bed, what we usually do is the bedroom will have a double bed, so it can take 2 people. The dining area, which you're looking at now here, will be set up this way, but that sofa is also a sofa bed and it will take another 2 people. So when we advertise it, we'll put it out to say it takes a maximum of 4 people. And you can either rent out the room per person, as in to say per person per night, or you can just rent out the whole room on a nightly rate, whatever single nightly rate you've got, which means however many people they have, a maximum being 4, they'll just pay the same amount. Okay, there's also another strategy, which is social housing. This is kind of coming up. It's always been there, but not many people used it as much. So at the minute, because of what's happening around, people losing their jobs, they're actually going back to the council to seek accommodation. The council is desperate for houses to be able to give people a certain amount of money that they can actually stay in. Now, with some social houses or some councils, they pay really good money. Some don't pay very good money. And dependent on where you are and what you think of the social housing strategy, it may be worth looking into because it can also generate some good cash flow. Okay, so where can you find these? Now I can imagine some of you guys thinking, okay, this looks really good. I could actually try this out. This could work for me. Where can I find them? And there's a few places you can find them, and there's a few ways you can do it. One being an online platform. Now, if you've already started on your property journey now, you probably already know about these. And if you haven't at all, Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market, Spare Room, Gumtree, these are platforms that you can just log in and start searching for properties. You're looking for a 3-bed, 4-bed, 5-bed in whatever location, they will give you a long list of properties in that area. Some of them are actually loaded in by agents. Some of them are loaded by the landlords themselves. So you can actually look into it. I would recommend, if you're starting from scratch, you actually go on these platforms so you can familiarize yourself with the area. You can familiarize yourself with the type of property and how much rent that property will be in that certain area. It gives you a good idea. And the more times you do this, the more likely you're going to be able to assess a good deal before you even do any due diligence. Okay. Property agents, lettings and sources. Property agents, everyone knows there's an estate agent somewhere, wherever you're based. An estate agent or letting agent, I would recommend you actually start talking to these people. They've got massive portfolios of properties that they are gladly happy to actually give out to people that are genuine, people that are looking to actually make money for them. So there are a few people, and I know I've spoken to some of you guys who are on the call now, who are a bit nervous about speaking to agents, and I can understand. I was one of them at the start. What I would recommend is, if you're going to start speaking to agents and you understand or you know what area you want to invest in, try speaking to agents in a different area. Speak to a minimum of 10 different agents in an area that you're not actually going to be investing in, that you're not going to be working in. Get used to speaking to these guys, get used to understanding their language. And when you actually build a bit of confidence, then come back to your area and start speaking to those agents. If you actually create some good opportunities in areas that you're practicing in, you can actually still work with other people that are based in that area, and you can monetize on those properties that you found. So I would recommend you do that. You also have property deal sources. They also call themselves agents, and they find properties for people and they actually sell these property deals to people. So if you are, let's say you're time poor, but you've got a bit of cash and you're not necessarily patient enough to wait to find these deals yourself, you can work with property deal sources and they find deals for you. They find properties for you and they sell them at a certain rate, and you can actually take on those properties without having to look for them. Okay, direct to vendor. You will see this term D2V quite a lot. It means direct to vendor. That means you're cutting out the agent and going straight to the landlord. Speak to the landlord who owns the property directly. And in that way, you can also find some really good deals because once an agent is involved, there's an agent fee that's part of it that you also have to pay. So if you go directly to the landlord, you're cutting the middleman out, you get a better deal. I always say it's good to go direct to landlord if you're looking for 1 or 2 properties. But if you're going to be looking to scale and have loads of properties, direct to vendor will take you a lot longer because you have to find these one at a time. But if you work with an agent can find you these properties a lot quicker. Okay, so direct to vendor, where can you find these? You can send out leaflets. There's companies that send out leaflets. They design leaflets. They can actually deliver these for you. And you can also send letters. Now, I spoke about an HMO before. When you're running an HMO, in many cases, you have to register that HMO is live, and you have to tell the council, the local council, that HMO is actually operational. And whenever that happens, that HMO is then registered on the council website to say there's an HMO here. Now that information is available to the public. So you can go on your local council and download all the HMOs that are in your area. It gives you all the addresses and send letters directly to them and tell these landlords how you can help them. And there's some good deals that can come from that as well. Social media presence. And I can already feel the cringe on some of the guys that I've spoken to that are on the call now. But being on social media on any platform, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and telling people what you are doing, that will attract a lot of opportunities. You want to be in a position where anyone who thinks property, they think of you and they bring those opportunities to you. But you won't get any opportunities if no one knows what you're doing, if no one knows that you do anything to do with property. Now, in many cases, we have a normal main job, and then we do property as a side thing. And whenever someone asks us what we do, we talk mainly about the main job itself, to say I'm an engineer, or I'm an accountant, or I work in the hospital. If you're actually going to be focusing on the property side of your business and you want that property side to actually build, tell the people that you're an investor who happens to work in a different place as well. I'm a property investor who also happens to be an accountant. I'm a property investor who also happens to be an engineer. Put the property in the conversation. Let people know that you are actually getting involved in property, even if you don't fully understand a lot of it, but people knowing that you're into it, it brings these opportunities back to you. And lastly, networking. Up until probably about February, March 2020, networking was mainly done in person. So you would get these invitations on Eventbrite and you travel over to hotels, you go to coffee shops, you go to different places where people gather and discuss property. What we are doing right now would have most likely happened in person. So now we're actually sort of like pushed to virtually network, and that comes with its advantages. And it's great to be able to actually be part of something like this in the comfort of your own home, gathering this information, having access to people that think the same way as you. It's the best way to have these opportunities. An example, in our family group here, the ZPI, we have loads of opportunities that are thrown in the group. On the WhatsApp group, we discuss opportunities in different areas. People are looking and people are searching and working together. And all of that is part of the networking side. The information that I'm sharing here, again, part of networking. What you're doing now is networking. And I recommend that if there's any networking groups that you can find, or any other people that you know of that are interested in property, bring them into network groups and then actually share all the information that you know and share the opportunities. It's the best way to actually come up with some of these deals. Okay. So those are the 5 main ways of actually finding these property deals. And this doesn't just come down to rent alone. Whatever strategy you're looking to, whatever strategy you're working on, this is a good way to actually generate these opportunities. Okay, what could go wrong? We all gravitate towards the things that go wrong. In many cases, you talk about what goes right. People say, "Oh, well done, happy days," and thumbs up. But you talk about things that go wrong, that conversation goes for a lot longer. I can attest to that. Whenever I post anything to do with property and the properties we acquire, or the pictures of the houses that we've done up, and people say, well done, they like, and all that, which is really nice. But whenever I post about how the property has been trashed, that actually generates a lot longer conversations, more comments, and a lot more happens in there, because we all gravitate towards things that go wrong. So it will be wrong of me not to highlight things that could go wrong in this particular acquisition way or acquisition tool. So no or not enough guest booking or tenants in the property. So if you're running it as an SA, what if you don't have enough guests? Or if you're running it as an HMO, what if you don't get any tenants in the property? Yeah, you're screwed. It's something that's a little bit worrying. So obviously, let's put it out there. Too much upfront cost. In the illustration that I showed, I mentioned £4,000. That's on average. There's properties where you end up going all the way to 8,000. Some people, I know someone who's actually spent £12,000 in a rent-to-rent deal. We don't recommend you do that. However, too much upfront cost, or someone thinking now, just looking at that illustration, if you were one of the people who's thinking £4,000, can't afford that, that is probably one of the things that you're thinking, too much upfront cost. No profits even at high occupancy. Now, ideally, once you've actually taken on this property, you're running it as an SA or running it as an HMO, you want this property to be occupied for the entire month. You want this HMO to have full tenants. If it's a 5-bedroom, you wanted to have 5 people actually already in there. What if you've got 5 people in a 5-bed and you're not making a profit? What if this property is actually occupied for the entire month and you're still not making a profit? That is something that could go wrong. New regulations from the government, that's something that worries people. And I hear people who haven't started in property come up and say, well, the government could change the regulations and you guys would be screwed and stuff like that. Of course, something like that can happen. We'll talk about how you can get around that. Landlords may want to pull out the agreement. Now, if you're one of the people who's thinking, yes, I see where you're coming from, but then you don't own that property and the person who owns it could easily take it away from you, and again, you will lose out. Yes, that's a possibility. So I'll put that as one of the list. And lastly, bad guests booking the property. And this is the one that freaks people out quite a lot. Whenever we talk about service accommodation, anyone who's not in service accommodation will most likely say to you, I don't do it because guests will come and destroy my property. I'm not involved. I don't want to be involved. I'm not interested. So what can we do about these? Sort of broken them down. I know this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more things that could go wrong. I just pulled out the majority of things that people actually mentioned to me. And I know you can actually make that list a lot longer. But let's just talk about these ones for now. If you don't have enough guest booking or you don't have enough tenants in the property, what can you do to try to ensure that happens? So firstly, due diligence and marketing. This is something that has to happen before you actually take on the property. If you're running it as a service accommodation, looking at the area itself, the certain things you can look out for: is the location right? Who are you actually looking to get? Because are you going to get the people that you're looking for? In service accommodation, there's 2 different types of people that you're going to get coming in. You're going to have the tourist, the standard person who wants to go for a weekend, or a family that's just going to go away for a weekend. Or you're going to get the contractor, the people that have projects that they're working on that are far away from home. So they will go and book a hotel, or i.e. book your property that they'll live in for a week or longer, and then come back home at the weekend or something like that. Those are the two different types. If you're going to be targeting contractors, you need to be looking at that location and trying to figure out what projects are going on there, what developments are happening, what companies are actually working there, and what is going on that could attract people to your property. That is part of the due diligence. And once you've done that due diligence, which is great, and you've got all the information, that doesn't mean it's going to work. It will only work if people know about it. And the only way people will know about it is if you market it. Okay. So once the property is on, putting it on Airbnb, putting it on booking.com, on as many as possible online travel agents, call them OTAs, but online travel agents, in that you can actually advertise it on, so that as many people as possible actually know about the property. And if it's an HMO, advertise it to as many platforms as possible. And I mentioned before that I was speaking to someone who was trying to get tenants into their HMO. They advertise it online everywhere, but they still couldn't get any viewings or anyone come through. And the question that I asked was, if I walk past your property now, would I know that is up for rent? And they were like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, if I walk past your property right now, I'm not looking for it online. If I walk past it right now, would I know that it's up for rent? And they said, no, there's nothing on the property that says that the property is actually up for rent. So what we got them to do is to just put a label on there. You don't have to have a professional banner like what an agent would do. Just a piece of paper on the window that says rooms available for rent, starting at X amount a month. And as soon as they did that, within a week, they had 5 viewings. And that's because the majority of people that want to live in that property are based in that area. They walk past that house all the time. You can actually just put labels on the property. You can put like flyers in local shops, and people around there will need to know. Not everyone actually goes online to find properties. So the marketing is really, really important. Otherwise, you're not actually going to get anything. So too much upfront cost, it is a concern, a genuine concern. If you put too much money up front, it's going to take you too long for that money to come back. So what can we do? So negotiate deposit and rent-free periods and take out furniture on credit. Now, you're probably thinking, why would anyone give me their property and I pay no deposit, or actually allow me to stay in that property for no rent. So I say rent-free periods. You can ask for a month's rent, you can ask for half a month, you can ask for 3 months, whatever you ask for from the landlord. Now you need to understand that firstly, you're not actually moving into this property. You're not the one who's living in the property. What we always suggest that you do is when you're speaking to these landlords, you let them know that firstly, I'm not living in this property. We're going to be managing this property for this strategy. We're going to be managing it for students who are going to be coming to live in the property per room, or professionals, or we're working with local companies that are going to need this property for their projects and stuff like that. But for us to work with these companies, we need to make your property look a certain way. If you've got properties that you've set up before, show them the pictures and say, this is what we do with our properties. Would you allow us to just set it up for a month, rent-free, whilst we improve the standards of your property, whilst we increase the value of your property? Would you allow us to stay in this property rent-free whilst we set that up? So that's what the rent-free is about. And then also let them know that if you're going to be running it as an HMO, for example, and you've got a 5-bedroom property, each tenant that's going to be moving in will be paying a deposit. It's pointless for you to be paying a deposit to a landlord and then receiving a deposit from the people that are coming into the property. Why not say to the landlords, the deposit that's being brought in by these tenants, we can put it into deposit protection scheme where you have access to it. That way you don't have to pay a deposit. We just have access to the same deposit that the tenant comes through. So if you negotiate a deposit-free, a rent-free period, that drastically reduces the upfront cost. And also, with the furniture that you purchase for each of these properties, you can purchase them on credit. Companies like IKEA will allow you to buy as much as you want, and you just pay for it within X amount of months on credit on a monthly basis, and they just spread it along for whether it's 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is. They spread it along with no interest. So it's the same amount of money that you're paying, but you're doing it monthly. And the advantage of it is, one, you don't pay anything upfront. So you can buy £3,000 worth of furniture and don't pay £3,000. You'll be paying for it monthly. And if it's set up on a monthly basis, you bring the tenants in or you bring the guests in, they're the ones that actually start paying for that furniture. Therefore, you're left with pretty much nothing to pay for upfront. So that's how you reduce the upfront cost. Hope that makes sense. So landlords may want to pull out of the agreement. Very valid. So what we do is you align your management agreement to protect your finance. When you're actually taking on these properties, as if even when you're actually moving in yourself, you have to sign a contract. But because we're managing these properties, it's not a contract, it's an agreement. And within that agreement, there's terms that protect you, there's terms that protect the landlord. But in that agreement, you can also ensure that you put in a protection for your finance. If you've calculated in your due diligence that the money that you've paid for, that you've put in upfront, will come back within 6 months, you put into your agreement, whether 6, 7, or 8 months, that if the contract is broken or if they decide that they want to cancel the contract before that period, they're liable to remunerate you for the money that you've put in. That way you protect your finance, even if they decide to come out of it. If they come out of it after that point, at least your money has come back. You don't actually lose anything. No profits, even at high occupancy. Okay. Accurate deal calculation to make rental offers. Now, what I mean by this is, if you're going to do your calculations of trying to understand how much money you're going to be making on a monthly basis for each of the strategies that we've spoken about, you need to know that this is exactly how much money I'll be making. So if you're going to need to pay a rent of 1,500, just using the illustration, if you're going to be paying rent of 1,000 and the bills are £500, sorry. So if you're paying out 1,500, you need to know that at a certain occupancy, this is how much you're going to be making. So if at 75% occupancy, you're going to be making £2,000, you know you're going to be making £500 every month at 75%. You can do the same thing for HMOs. HMOs is a lot easier anyway, because you know exactly at what point you break even. You know exactly at what point you actually start making a profit. So ideally, you want to start making profit. If it's a 5-bed, you actually ideally want to start making a profit on tenant number 4. Yeah. If you make profit on tenant number 3, brilliant. But ideally, you start making a profit on tenant number 4, and then tenant number 5 is complete profit. That way, if you lose one tenant in a 5-bed, you're still making a profit with 4, and it gives you time to find tenant number 5. So all of that calculation needs to be done before you even take on the property. That way, you ensure you know exactly where things are going to be. There's other ways of trying to understand how the money actually comes in and how it comes out, and the calculations that you have to know how much money you will make. We can discuss that in private if anyone wants to know any further. Now, new regulations coming from the government, that freaks people out quite a lot, because once the government puts in any regulations, you might struggle to be able to make money. But with every change in regulation, there's always an opportunity that comes with it. A lot of property investors already understand that. So in terms of serviced accommodation, the only regulations that are available now is the 90-day rule in London. This is in England, by the way. The 90-day rule in London, which only allows you to have a guest for only 90 days, no longer. But regulations are not necessarily there anywhere else in England. And whenever they do change anything, the good thing about the government is they give you a heads up. The heads up could be 2 years. So a lot of things start in London, and you know that these are going to be coming further up once they started in London. But then it's not something that they decide that we're going to put this in tomorrow, and you don't have any time to react. It takes ages for them to actually get anything agreed and implemented in any area. So you have a lot of time to decide what you want to do with that. And then the last one, bad guests booking a property. Okay, so take necessary measures to reduce the chances. You get some guests that damage the properties, or you get guests where you say it's a maximum of 4 people, and then all of a sudden there's 27 people in your property and they're trashing it, they're having a party and all that stuff. There's certain measures that you can take to try to reduce these chances, i.e. if you take deposits up front, some hefty deposits sometimes, obviously the money comes back after the stay. So those who understand why you're doing it will accept it. Get cameras up on your door so you know exactly who's coming in and when they're coming in, or how many people are coming into the property. So if you say there's a maximum of 4 and all of a sudden 10 people show up, you've got a chance then to actually do something about it, rather than being told by the neighbor the next day that there was 25 people in your house. Taking IDs and actually verifying these IDs once you've taken them off the person who's actually doing the booking, and making sure that they understand that anything that goes wrong, they are liable. Not everyone else that comes with them. It's the person booking that is liable. So these are the sort of things that you can do. Some people also have noise detectors in the property that actually alarm them as soon as a noise comes to a certain level. And I would say one of the best ones is creating really good rapport with the neighbors, whoever actually lives at the property. If you've got really good rapport with them, you've got a chance of being able to react, and they can also play a part in trying to protect your property as well. Okay, so in summary, what we've just discussed now is what a rent to rent is. So as we mentioned, the rent to rent is not necessarily a strategy, it's an acquisition tool, how you actually get the property and use it to be able to generate income from someone else's asset. What can you do with the rent to rent? We spoke about serviced accommodation, we spoke about houses in multiple occupancy, and also social housing. And where and how can you find this property deal? We mentioned that you can do that online. Agents, you can find them through direct to vendor letters. You can also find these deals by actually telling everyone about what you do on social media, and mainly networking, which is what we're doing now. And then I also mentioned how to try to maximize the profits and minimize the risks. And that's the main message here: to minimize your upfront costs and maximize your rental income. So sometimes people think that you make money by increasing the money that comes in. It's one of the ways. The other way of actually making sure you make a lot of money is to reduce how much money you have to pay out. So minimize the upfront costs, reduce the amount of money that you have to pay out. That automatically increases the money that comes in. So realistically, my presentation was supposed to stop here. However, I've got a bonus for you guys, only because I really like you all. So bonus material. My wife just gave me a funny look. I don't know why. So the bonus material that I've got here is about mindset. Now, this is something that not many people actually talk about in terms of property. When it comes to property, a lot of you guys I already know have been to property training courses. And what I've discussed already so far is what we mainly talk about: the numbers, where to find them, the motivation on how to actually find the properties. But we don't talk about the challenges and how it can actually affect you. Now, I'm going to tell you the dirty truth here about property. And when it comes to the mindset side of things, you are going to lose money. You are going to get rejected. You are going to lose friends. That's a big one. It is going to be very challenging. You will feel lonely at times, and there's going to be a lot of fear that will set in. Now, when it comes to fear, some of the people that are starting out now already feel that fear just by looking at some of the stuff that we're talking about now. But this is the side of property that not many people actually talk about. And I wanted to address this. I'm saying this stuff here because personally, I've actually gone through it, still going through some of them. And I wanted to point out some of the things that we have already done to help alleviate some of the worries that comes with this part of property. Now, what can we do about it? So firstly, when it comes to losing money, don't actually look at it as losing money. So I actually repeat that I'm investing my money. Now, some of the projects that we actually get involved in actually may look like it's a complete loss in money, but if you don't pick up the lesson in it, then it will be a loss in money. If you find the lesson in it, then it was money invested because you've learned something that you can utilize going forward. So every single penny that you actually take out into a deal, into anything that you're doing in property, it's an investment because it teaches you something. Okay. You are going to get rejected. Yes, you are going to get rejected. Now, a lot of people actually go out to see agents and just think that on the first conversation that they'll have, they're going to find a deal. If you have that mindset, you're probably going to get really disappointed and stressed out. So I will either learn or I will earn. Either way, I will not lose. So this is the same concept that I've already spoken about in terms of the money. But when it comes to the rejection side of things, a lot of us take it personally. When an agent says, nope, not interested, if a landlord or a vendor or anyone you're getting involved in says, no, I'm not interested, especially when it comes to raising funds. Yeah, I'm talking to you guys. You're trying to raise funds. You're looking at your deal. You think it's a fantastic deal. How is it possible that you don't want to get involved? I know you've got the money. Why don't you actually give me that money? And someone says no, straight up no. And then you start asking loads of questions. Well, why? Why don't you want to give me your money? And you start taking things personally. It's just how it is, people. Understand that you will get rejected, but there's a lesson to be learned in every rejection that you get. And I would always recommend that actually go out for rejections. And then if you get acceptance, it's actually a bonus. But if you go out for rejections, read a book called Go for No. It's a very, very, very good book. Go for No, actually go out. The concept in Go for No is actually going out for rejections. They say that if you're going to make 100 phone calls, in most cases, you're going to get 10 yeses. So what they do is instead of aiming for 10 yeses, they say aim for 90 no's. So you actually make phone calls and aim for 90 no's. If you get 10 yeses before you get to 90 no's, you keep making phone calls until you get 90 no's. That way you actually get more acceptances and you actually reward yourself for all the rejections that you get. You actually start enjoying getting rejections and you actually sort of inevitably get acceptances. I would recommend you read the book Go for No. It's a very good one. Okay. You're going to lose friends. This freaks a few people out, but some of you guys are probably thinking, yeah, I could do with losing a few friends right now. You are going to lose friends. Now, this is how I look at it. I am outgrowing my current circle of friends and therefore allowing wiser ones to enter my life. Whenever you actually get to a point where some people start challenging what you're talking about, friends that used to sort of like support everything that you did because you were in the same kind of bubble, in the same kind of thought process. Once you start stepping out of that, and then they start questioning what you're doing and then start kind of criticizing the stuff that you're doing, you can tell that you're sort of like parting ways. at that point, don't be dragged back into the norm that you were thinking, do you know what, I'd rather stay in here so that I keep these friends and leave these opportunities that people are talking about. Be confident enough to actually step out, take those comments or take those criticisms, and allow people that are thinking the way that you're currently thinking now, the people that are in this call right now, they have the same kind of mindset, allow them to enter your life. And those people that you've left, trust me, at some point they will actually think, you know what, I should have gone with them, or they will start actually asking more questions about what you're doing now, and they will want to join your circle. It is going to be very challenging. The way I look at that is every skill worth acquiring comes with a challenge. That's how we grow. I was using yesterday the analogy of a slide. If you think about a slide, you have to go up the steps or up the ladder to be able to enjoy the slide going down. If you didn't have to go up the steps, you wouldn't really enjoy the slide going down at the end of it. So when you're going up those steps, those are the challenges, and they're worth it because you get to the point where you can enjoy the slide on the other end. So every skill worth acquiring, or every deal worth acquiring, every opportunity worth following comes with a challenge. That is how we grow. So embrace it, people. You will feel lonely at times. True. I am transitioning into a circle that suits me more. So once you transition from the circle of friends that you had before, as you're moving into the new circle of friends, that small period, you're going to feel lonely because you don't have those people that you used to confide in, and you're starting to inviting new people into your kind of the new circle that you're joining. There's a period where you're going to feel lonely. Don't worry too much about it. It is temporary. Either way, whether you fall back into the old circle or you move forward to the new circle, you're not going to be lonely for long. A lot of fear is going to set in. That is the painful truth, people. But I listened to a guy called Les Brown, and he puts it this way: fear as an acronym is false evidence appearing real. I feel the fear and do it anyway. So fear is false evidence appearing real, because in many cases, if you think about it, some of the things that we're actually scared of, we create a certain scenario that is far much worse than what it actually is going to be like. And the best way to get rid of that fear or subside it or push it down is to actually go ahead and do it, and actually realize that, it wasn't actually that bad. And in many cases, we know that is the case, actually, that once you actually go and do the things that you were scared of, you realize that it wasn't really as bad as I thought it was. And that's the way to actually get around it. But the message that I wanted to put on this part of the presentation, which is the bonus part of the presentation, is that there is parts of property that not many people tend to talk about. And it's when you start going through them and you start questioning, why did I actually do it to start with? Why didn't they tell me that this is going to be this difficult? Why didn't they tell me that this stuff is going to be happening? It's important from my point of view that actually highlights that that is stuff that will go on, and you're not going to completely get rid of it. But some of this stuff is stuff that you actually go through, even in your current job, in what you're actually doing now. You actually go through some of this stuff, but it's good to actually address them and know that mainly you are not alone. This family that you're actually part of right now, this Zimbabwean property investors, which is one of the many networks that actually talk about property. We do talk about property because it's mainly about what it is. It mainly is what it is that we want to actually have people on. However, all of the other stuff that I've just highlighted there, we're all going through it. However, you don't have to go through it on your own. We're also here to help each other when it comes to that. So you are not alone. We're here to help. And this is the main message I wanted to put out on the second part of this presentation. So hopefully all the stuff that I've shared about rent to rent, stuff I've shared about the mindset side of things is helpful to you guys. And if you are currently on this call, feel free to start asking questions.
With my...
Okay. Let's see.
No questions. We understood. Thank you, Muzzie.
No worries, fella. Okay. I'm just trying to check if there was anything on the chats. That was Charlene saying that she was listening, and Tabo confirming that I'm in trouble. Thank you very much.
So,
Okay.
Muzzie, it's Ben. I got a question for you.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. Very insightful and very informative. Appreciate
No
you
problem, brother. All
taking the
I'm
time to
doing
do
is
that.
spreading the fragrance.
Bless you. You were listening then, yeah?
I loved
Praise,
it. Absolutely
praise
loved
God.
it.
Okay. Well, maybe if you, outside of your why, if it's okay with you, you could share your presentation with us. That would be great. But I got a question with regards your first slide, where you were making a comparison between a decision of buying outright and then doing the rent to rent, or either going the rent to rent way. There was a point when you talked about, okay, if you had the 29 grand, you might as well, or you could go with 7 deals of rent to rent. My question is, how do you weigh that? Because obviously, if we're looking at it in terms of cash flow, I think one will probably favor to invest in 7 deals. But how do you weigh against not making a decision to purchase? Because I think our mindsets, especially not speaking for everyone, but having grown in Zimbabwe, there's always that mindset that owning this thing is, there's that sort of kind of status thing that comes with it. But then your mindset also, there's that thing that goes in your head that you actually own this thing outside of, okay, I'm doing the rent to rent thing, but it's actually not my property. So how do you weigh against the value of saying, okay, if I'm thinking long term, it's probably better to purchase, or is it not better to purchase? I'm not quite understanding how you would then weigh the decision to invest in 7 rent to rent deals, which will probably be more work. and I would imagine, though the returns sound very lucrative on paper, but I'm not really sure how you would outrightly make that decision to say, I would rather do 7 deals than 1 deal where I actually own this thing.
Yeah, I hear you. That is an absolutely valid question. Very important topic to talk about, especially on this group. And you pointed out something that's really important in terms of owning stuff. Owning stuff. We have this sensation, or this notion that if I own it, I feel much better because I actually own it. Now, there is realistically no problem with owning anything. The issue that I have with owning stuff is when you actually put yourself in financial trouble to be able to own it. Okay, so what I usually say to people is the rent to rent is your enabler to create cash that you will then use to buy. Yeah. So before I actually got to know about any of these strategies, the only way I knew about being able to purchase properties is you just work and work and work, raise enough money to be able to make to put down a deposit and use the mortgage company, i.e. the mainstream bank, and actually purchase the property that way. And once you've got that, start that process again, which will take probably another 15 to 20 years to be able to raise enough money to purchase a second property. There's loads of other different strategies that you can use to be able to buy houses. Now, owning still feels really good when you talk about, say, I actually own that property, but the way I make the decision, and I would recommend other people do as well, is own whatever you want to own. However, use assets to buy the things that you actually want to purchase. Use assets to purchase liabilities. Don't put yourself in a situation to purchase things just because it feels good to own something. So imagine if you have, using the same illustration that we've just spoken about, imagine if you have the seven, let's say you've got the 30 grand, and 30 grand will get you the one house, and it will generate you 1500, which is good. And I know a lot of people will be happy generating 1500. But if you get the properties that you put on rent to rent with that 30K, and you're generating 7 grand, that 7 grand a month, that's going to keep going. It's going to take you, what, 4 or 5 months to be able to raise enough money to purchase the next property anyway. So you're now using these properties, someone else's assets, and using the cash you're generating from that to be able to purchase the property that you actually want to purchase. So you're using these assets to be able to purchase the house if you want to actually purchase anyway. So someone will generate this cash to get some more properties to continue generating the cash. And some people who are really keen on owning stuff, I would recommend you use these assets, or use someone else's asset, use someone else's money to be able to purchase these funds, these houses. Now, rent to rent is another way of creating the cash flow, generating cash flow. But you've also got some investors that have a lot of money, and they're not necessarily sure what to do with the money, but they know definitely that they don't want that money to stay in the bank. Yeah, not many people are aware that when your money sits in the bank, you're actually losing it. It's going down. We have this thought process that because we get 1%, it's actually less than 1% profit, but let's say 1% profit in the bank, you're making a profit as you go along. But that is not necessarily the case. And a lot of investors actually already know that because inflation is running at 3%, you're actually losing 2% of your money as you go along. So they want to take the money out and actually start putting it in assets. So there's people who are actually just ready to give you money to purchase houses and do all this stuff that you want to do, as long as you can pay them back at a higher rate. So they're asking for things like 6%, 8%, 10%, dependent on what it is that actually works out for them. If you were to get those kinds of people and you get the whole 100K using this same principle, you get the whole 100K from someone else, they purchase it, you take on the property, and then you do something with it, add value to it, to remortgage the property, you get it at a higher value, pay back the investor with the interest that they're asking for. You now own a property, but you're not the one who actually raised the money. So owning is fine. However, it's how you then put up the money. What I'm against is someone actually working really, really hard on a job, and the little that they make, they use that to actually start purchasing properties that will actually put them in a financial turmoil. That's what I'm slightly against. And this is the reason why I want to point out that there's another way to generate more cash flow whilst you're actually still working, and then use that money to then start purchasing if that's what you really want to do. I hope that sort of clarifies that, Ben.
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot. That house you have on there, is that actually in Coventry? Because you and Brian are falling guilty to trying to attract me to nonsense. Like, it's bad enough I moved out from London. Is that a ploy to move me up there now? Is it?
Firstly, no, it's not
Okay.
in Coventry, and secondly, you will not find a house that looks like that for 100K.
Okay, good.
In some
My
property in
second,
the United States. Anyway, sorry, man.
all right. Okay, I see, B. Yeah. Okay. my second question. Sorry, I know there are others that probably want to ask, but I might as well just get mine out of the way.
No problem.
How do you scale up? Obviously, I guess 3, 4 properties or 6, 7 properties, I guess, are manageable. But at some point, surely it becomes a little bit too much for just you and your boo to sort of kind of manage. And I mean, I don't know, but how do you scale the business up? What's your strategy for getting bigger?
It's when my boo says that's too much now, stop. But in terms of scaling, I think we all know our limits. If you don't know your limit, you will find out very soon. As you do things yourself, naturally you want to do things yourself to start with, because we want to save as much money as possible. So I know people who run service accommodation, they do the the cleaning themselves, they do the check-in themselves, they do everything on their own. As you get more and more properties, you will feel that, okay, this is a little bit too much. And when that happens, you start figuring out how to start leveraging. So it starts off by getting a cleaning company, and that gives you a little bit more time. You take over everything. And then until you get to a certain point, you think, okay, now this is getting a little bit much. What else can I leverage? Can I actually pass someone else to do the marketing? Can I start finding a way to automate the check-in details, the check-in system? Get keys to be in a remote place where the guest can actually do the whole check-in process and the checkout process on their own without you being there. So as you start growing, you will figure out what you can do and what you can't do and start leveraging. Now you can get to a point where you can then employ someone to start looking over this stuff. You do the work and getting more properties, hand them over to the operations manager who can then actually run the company for you, and you can literally run the whole business hands-free. So you start actually working on the business, not in the business, if that makes sense.
No, that's okay. Thanks. Brilliant.
No problem. Okay, I'm trying to find the chat. I know something was put on the chat. I've just stopped sharing that. I've got a question. How do you find tenants for the rent to rent? Okay, so when we say rent to rent, as mentioned, rent to rent itself is not a strategy, it's the acquisition. So when you say rent to rent, I'm hoping you mean HMOs. Okay, but I'll touch on both. So how do you find the tenants for HMOs? How do you find the people to come and live in your property? There's a website called Open Rent. Open Rent is one of the platforms that you just advertise your property, and you advertise the properties on a room-to-room basis and just let people know that you're actually advertising this house. It's available per room. This is the amount of money that you'll be paying per month or per week, dependent on what you're looking for. It also allows you to say what you're looking for, whether it's a professional or you're looking for students. Open Rent is a very good website for that. It also puts your advert in different platforms like Rightmove. It puts it on Zoopla. It also puts it on Spare Room, and that's the online platforms. And if it's an HMO, as I mentioned before, I would recommend you go to local shops, the premier, those shops that are around the property itself. They allow you to actually put adverts of the property at their window. And the majority of people that come to that shop will see those adverts. Some of these shops will charge you something like £1 a night or something like that. And you just pay for 2 months straight and just let that that leaflet or that advert stay there. Also, letting people know that the property is actually open for rent by either putting a professional sign at the property or a sign, no matter how amateurish it looks, as long as there's something there that tells people that the property is up for rent. So that's how you advertise for HMOs. And when it comes to service accommodation, I mentioned earlier on OTAs, online travel agents, i.e. Airbnb, Booking.com. You've got one called Mr. B&B. You've got Expedia and all sorts, TripAdvisor, lastminute.com, all of those types of online travel agents. Just advertise it on as many of them as possible. That is one main way that you need to be advertising. There's agencies that actually work with contractors that you can tell people about. There's also ways of you can call people directly if you have any local hotels around the area. There's some contractors that come to those local hotels whilst they park their vans outside. You can take phone numbers and call people directly at random and just let them know that you've got properties in that area that you can offer them for less, or if you just advertise that you get the whole house rather than a hotel room. That's how you market for service accommodation. I hope that clarifies that, Emmanuel.
Yes, it does. Thanks a lot for that. Thanks.
No problem. Tabo says, yes, true, Muzzie, we're offering 6 to 10% returns. So I was talking earlier on about investors that have money and money is degrading or money is devaluing whilst it's sat in the bank. do not be under the impression that you are actually making money if your money is sat in the bank. I'm not saying clear out your entire account and start paying for other things or buying assets. I'm just saying that if you've got quite a lot of money in the bank and you know you don't need all of it, I would recommend you put them in assets. We work with the likes of Tabo, who offers 6%, 10% returns on properties. They buy properties and actually give money back with those returns in a 12-month period. So if you've got a lot of money in the bank right now and you can live without the money for 12 months, you might as well make that money work for you a lot harder than what it is right now in the bank. Well, let's be honest, in the bank it's not actually working at all. We want to all get to a point where our money is working far much harder for us than we are for it, and this is one of the ways to do that. So whilst the money is just sat there, you might as well put it in something that it will actually generate some cash. I put in a proposition a couple of days ago in the group to say that we're working on a project that will generate you 1% of how much you give us a month, up to a maximum of 6 months. So we're looking for 35K. So these are types of opportunities that we work with. And if you are looking for something like that and you have some cash that you want to actually put out and make work, feel free to get in touch with myself or get in touch with the likes of Tabo, and we can get that happening. So is there any other questions? Brilliant presentation. Thanks a lot for the presentation. You're most welcome, guys. Glad to help. All we're about here is adding value. If there's anything that you've picked here that is helpful, then I am happy. Any questions from anyone else?
Hi, Muzzie.
Hello. You okay, Shelly?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I just want to ask, maybe people are going to laugh at me to say silly questions, but
There's no such thing here.
yeah, I just want to ask if you are doing that rent to rent, are you going to pay the owner, or it's you take the whole amount of money for room to room?
Okay. So if I were to take a straight example of, let's say in Scotland, I don't know the Scotland places except for Glasgow and Edinburgh. I don't know anything else. So if we were to take a house in Scotland and it's a 5-bedroom house, now a 5-bedroom house in a certain area is going, if you're going to be giving out to a family, if you go on Rightmove, it will give you all these numbers. But let's say for a 5-bedroom house, you're going to be paying £1,000 rent if you're going to be moving in as a family. Okay. So what you are looking to do now is to take that property on. Let's say you actually offer £1,000 a month to the landlord. Okay. So you take the property on, you're paying £1,000, and then you start renting out each of the rooms. Let's say each of the rooms, you're going to be renting them out for £500. It depends on what the area is and how much rent you're going to be renting out for per room. But let's say you charge £500 per room. So as you're aware, with the 5 rooms, £500 each, you're going to be making £2,500, but you're paying the landlord 1,000. And let's say you've got bills of £500 there. If you're paying the landlord 1,000 and you have to pay the bills of £500, but the tenants are giving you 2,500, the difference there is your profit. That's how this works.
Yeah, the owner knows about it, or?
Yes. I would always recommend that the owner, the landlord, the agent, whoever you're working with needs to be aware of exactly what you're doing. Okay. Now, the question that usually rises at that point is people start asking, well, if the landlord knows that this is what you're doing, why don't they do it themselves? Yeah. And it's a valid question, but you'll be surprised how many times people don't want to manage properties. So when you actually tell them that you will be managing the property, they don't want to be involved in management of property because of different reasons. Okay. So I don't know what's going on there. I'm just gonna mute everyone because it's getting noisy. Okay. So in many cases, landlords do not actually want to to manage properties. So they actually looking for people that will do the management for them. This is why you've actually got letting agencies, because majority of landlords don't want to manage properties. So even if they know about exactly what you are doing, they won't be interested. If they are interested in doing it themselves, then that's fine. Let them do it and let them actually run it themselves, and then just find another landlord. But don't do anything with the property without the landlord actually knowing about it. They need to be aware of exactly what you're doing. Does that clarify that, Shelley?
Oh, thank you so much. So can you tell me how am I going to take out my money I put in my bank as like 5 years, so they don't want to give me back? What can I do?
What, your bank doesn't want to give you back your money?
Yeah, I put it in bonds.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Okay. You need help from someone else other than me when it comes
Oh,
to
no.
that.
Oh,
I can find you someone who can help with that. That's not a problem. Let's have a chat in private.
okay. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Okay. If they know you are charged, I've got another question that I'm just reading on the chat, guys. If they know you are charging more per room, won't they ask for more than £1,000? Very good question. Very good question. Now, when I say the landlord needs to know what you're doing, I don't mean you need to tell them every single piece of information. They need to know that you're actually renting the rooms out per room. You're not the one who's living in the property. You're the one who's just managing the property, and everything that happens is there is your responsibility. But they don't need to know how much you are getting paid. You don't need to tell them that each room is going for a certain amount of money, because yes, if they know how much money you're making, there's a chance they're going to actually want to increase their rent because they know how much you're making. So that's a very valid point. Thank you very much for asking, Steph. And yeah, don't tell them how much you're getting paid. Okay, so I've got another question. Have any of the landlords had issues with the mortgage companies, i.e., mortgage company not allowing subletting? Yes, 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 yes. Another very important question there. Thanks, V. Okay, so here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier on about the management agreement, and when I was speaking about the management agreement, it was mostly to do with the protection of your finance. But as part of that management agreement, it's very important, guys, that you have in that agreement that it is the responsibility of the landlord to ensure that what you are doing with the property is in line with the mortgage provider. Okay, so you cannot discuss the mortgage with the lender if the property is not yours. So you can only tell the landlord. The best thing you can do is say, Mr. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, this is what I'm going to be doing with the property. Please ensure that it aligns with your mortgage lender. And if it doesn't align, please let us know and we'll see what we can do. You can either change the strategy, and sometimes unfortunately you have to let go of it if the mortgage lender doesn't allow it. But it's important to make sure that actually happens. It's not your responsibility to speak to the mortgage lender for the landlord. The landlord is the only one who's allowed to do that. So with the question that you've asked, V, that's a very, very, very important question. Now, the term subletting, a lot of people have different opinions about this, the term subletting. Some people say it's actually illegal to sublet, i.e., which is what we're doing. But subletting itself is not necessarily illegal. It becomes a problem if you're actually running a rent-to-rent without a management agreement. So if you were to get an AST, which is an assured short-hold tenancy, that's an agreement that says, I, Muzzie, am moving into this property. I will pay you the rent and I'm the tenant in this house. That's what an AST is. This is the standard contract that you would get if you were to rent a house. However, a management agreement says, I, Muzzie, will pay you rent. However, I'm not living in the property. I'm just managing it. I'm putting someone else in the property. I'm almost like a letting agent. I'm putting someone else in the property, but I'm a letting agent who actually pays you rent, not being paid by you. Okay. So that then makes that system or that setup not subletting. Okay, it makes it legal, so to speak. It becomes a corporate agreement, a company let. Okay, so yes, you are right. Landlords have had issues before with the mortgage, and it's not just the mortgage. Also, be careful, guys, when you're taking on a property for service accommodation especially, and it's an apartment which also has a different management company. When it comes to leases, some of them don't actually allow you to do service accommodation. Please be aware and let the landlords know. Make sure that they actually produce that lease agreement and have a look at it yourself to make sure that you're allowed to do that. We personally have gone through this. Unfortunately, we've had to be kicked out in a certain property because the leasehold management company did not allow them, and the landlords didn't know. So don't depend on the landlord saying, yes, it's fine. Just ask for the paperwork to actually check it. You won't be able to ask for the paperwork of the mortgage, unfortunately, but you need to let them know and also put it in your agreement that it is the responsibility of the landlord to ensure the mortgage company or the mortgage lender is aware of what we are doing. Hope that clarifies that, V. And thank you for asking that question. It's a great question. Oh, it's Vimbai, the Vimbai that joined today. Thank you very much, Vimbai. It's a great question. For a person who just joined the group, you've come with a really fantastic question. We're gonna be friends. We're gonna be good friends. We are. Thank you very much. Hope that helps. What's of the payments to Uncle Sam? Ben, I don't have any uncles called Sam, but yes, I understand. When it comes to the payment, when I said bills, the £500 bills, they're the ones that we are classing as Uncle Sam's payments, the taxes and all sorts. So you've got the council tax, the gas, electricity, utility, and all that nonsense. So unfortunately, all of that will need to be paid, and that is part of the bills. So we usually say that when it comes to rent, especially with HMOs, there's 3 payments. Now you're going to speak to people that will complicate this concept, but there's only 3 payments. One will go to the landlord. The other one will go to Uncle Sam, so to speak, the government. That's the utilities, the tax, and everything. And the third one will go to you. So when you're actually assessing a deal to figure out how much profit you're going to make, or if you're going to be making a profit, it's those 3 concepts you're looking at: yourself, the landlord, and the government. You can't negotiate too much with the government or at all. So if your money or if your payments are not enough, the only way you're going to get them to increase is to either charge the guest or charge the tenants more, and you can't necessarily do that if it's above the market rate. So you can only get it from the landlord themselves. So those are the 3 concepts you need to look at. So all of that will need to be looked into. In terms of the government, the bills, the taxes, there's not much you can do with it, unfortunately. Whatever they say you need to pay is exactly what you need to pay. And when it comes to HMOs, we always assume across the country, it's going to be about £100 per room. So if you've got a 5-bed, you're looking at bills of about £500. This is just an average across the UK. Further up north might be less, further down south might be a bit more, but that's round about what we're looking at. That covers all of the bills. Okay. Hope that helps, Ben. So are you doing any tax self-assessment for your rent-to-rent? I'm getting my accountant to deal with that side of things. And actually, it's a good point that we just raised there. We're going to be getting an accountant to come and speak to us on elements when it comes to the property businesses and how we run them. It's really important to cover that side of things. So we will get an accountant to come in and delve into it a lot. I'm not an accountant. I don't fully, I can barely tell you about numbers, to be honest with you. So I'm not really the best one to talk to you about that side of things. But when it comes to the self-assessment and the taxes side, I get my accountant to tell me that complicated information. I apologize, Ben. I can't tell you any more than that. Okay. Any other questions, guys? So for those that have joined us for the first time, our meeting usually starts at 5:30. We'll finish at 7 o'clock, and we are 4 minutes off the 7 o'clock mark, but we don't have to stay until 7 o'clock exactly. So this is what we do, guys. We just try to share and add value to as many people as possible. Hopefully the information that we've shared today is helpful. And if you need any more and you've got any more questions, or if you're watching on YouTube now and you want to ask more questions, feel free to drop them on the comments box and we will be able to assist you at some point. Yes, an accounting presentation is definitely required. We have quite a few people lined up, guys, and when they do come, you will not be disappointed. So once every month, we will have a specific speaker for a specific topic, all of it to help you guys in the property journey that we are all going through. The concept is just adding value and helping everyone that is part of this. So hopefully it's helpful, guys. If you've got any more questions, feel free to ask now. If not, I've unmuted everyone. Feel free to just jump in and either say goodbye or ask your question, whatever it is that you want to say.
Oh, good. Thank you, Muzzie.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Muzzie, for spreading the fragrance.
That's what I do, brother. That's what I do. That was brilliant, by the way. I absolutely loved it. Thank you, brother.
Okay, bless you.
I missed it, Pastor Ben.
Oh, blessings. I'll send you a link, brother.
We've got recordings, bro. We've got recordings.
Missed it. Thanks, Muzzie. That was brilliant.
No problem, bro. Thank you very much for being part of this.
Am I allowed to say thanks again?
Of course, Pella. You can say whatever you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Muzzie.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was listening with Tabo's mom. And now she's talking business. I managed.
As long as I get a piece, Tabo, we've got business to do here.
Yeah, she's saying the way you're laughing. I think you know that she didn't want you. Tabo, you're in trouble.
I'll pass on the message.
Thanks, Coco. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Muzzie. Thanks, bro.
No problem.
Thanks for reminding me, Feli.
Anytime, Pella, you know.
Thanks, Muzzie.
No problem, Steph. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Muzzie.